Ethan Cole walked out of the institution with his 8-month-old daughter and straight into a nightmare. A horrific car crash. His daughter, Lily, was killed instantly. He was left with critical injuries. The driver, Caleb Vance, showed up at the hospital. He'd exchanged hundreds of thousands of dollars for stacks of crisp $100 bills, dumping them onto Ethan's hospital bed. That daughter of yours had it coming. Bad luck from the start. She's gone. Take this money and get lost. Even if you sue, you won't get a dime more than this. Ethan, like a caged animal, lunged from the bed despite his injuries, tearing at Caleb. His voice was a raw, broken roar. I'll see you in court. You'll pay for what you did to my child. He never saw it coming. On the day of the hearing, his own wife, Victoria Thorne, presented a psychiatric evaluation to the court. It claimed he suffered from persecutory delusions, that he'd intentionally thrown himself in front of Caleb Vance's car, causing the death of a child in his arms. Ethan stared at his wife in the witness box, thunderstruck. He was classified as a high-risk psychiatric patient and locked away in a special ward for 5 years. 5 years of hell. Electroshock, needles, beatings. They almost killed him, leaving his body and mind shattered. By the end, the sound of the iron door to his room opening was enough to make him lose control of his bladder. The day he was finally deemed mentally stable, he saw the sun and blue sky for the first time in half a decade. His skin, hypersensitive from the constant trauma, broke out in a painful rash. A sleek black car pulled up in front of him, the tinted window gliding down. Victoria's exquisitely beautiful face appeared inside. Her eyes, cold and disgusted, scanned him as if he were a beggar on the street. Now that you're out, try to behave. I bought a house for you in Greenwich. You'll live there from now on. Without waiting for a response, she gestured to another car following hers to take him there, then rolled up the window and sped away. As Ethan stepped out of the car at his new residence, he saw a scene that would be burned into his memory for the rest of his life. Victoria's car drove past the gate of his house and pulled directly into the driveway of the mansion next door. She got out, standing by the car door with her arms open. A little girl came running out of the house, a joyful little bird, and flew into her embrace. The child's sweet, high-pitched voice pierced Ethan's heart. Mommy, Mommy, you're finally home. I missed you so much. Victoria swept the girl in her arms, kissing her plump, pink cheeks. Mommy missed you too, sweetie. Did you have fun with Daddy today? The little girl giggled, then turned and shouted back toward the house. Daddy, come quick. Mommy's tickling Chloe. Mommy's being mean. You have to tickle her back. A moment later, Caleb Vance's tall, imposing figure emerged from the house. He wrapped an arm around Victoria's shoulder and pressed a light, fleeting kiss to her delicate cheek. There, Daddy got revenge for you. Happy now, my little princess? Ethan's heart shattered. The pain was so intense it was hard to even stand. The sight of their happy little family was a torment worse than anything he had endured over the past 5 years. He wanted to claw his own eyes out. Why? His daughter was only 8 months old when she died in that crash. His life, the best years of it, was destroyed by that man. And now, while he and Victoria were still legally married, they were already living their perfect life as a family of 3. Ethan couldn't process the storm of emotions inside him. He didn't have the courage to rush over and confront them. His head was ringing, his heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, and his legs finally gave out. He collapsed, his hand landing on the sharp gravel of the driveway. The stones sliced a deep gash into his palm, and blood immediately began to pool beneath it. So that was it. Victoria had gone to such lengths to have him labeled insane, to lock him away for 5 years. Also, she could be with Caleb Vance and start a new family with him. They had been childhood sweethearts, inseparable until middle school. Their parents had always joked about them getting married one day, about them being together forever. Then Victoria's family fortunes collapsed. Both her parents were convicted of massive financial crimes and sentenced to death. As a minor, she was sent to live with a distant uncle. He didn't see her again until high school. Life with her uncle had been brutal. She was her punching bag. They beat her, screamed at her, barely fed her. Her clothes were always dirty. At 5'7", she weighed less than 100 pounds, a fragile, teetering ghost. So Ethan had brought her to his own home every day. He fed her, let her shower, washed her clothes, helped with her homework. He'd sneak her back to her uncle's house only after they were asleep, and she'd slip out again before dawn. One night, her drunk uncle came home late and saw her. He grabbed a shovel from behind the door and swung it at her. Without thinking, Ethan threw himself in front of her. The blow broke 2 of his ribs. He was covered in blood, but he didn't make a sound. That night, Victoria held him and swore to the heavens. Ethan, I will spend the rest of my life being good to you. I'm going to give you the best life imaginable. If I ever break this promise, may I die a horrible death." From that day on, she became fiercely ambitious, clawing her way up with relentless determination. She became a rising star in the New York business world, eventually re-establishing the Thorn Group from the ashes of her family's disgrace. Ethan was with her through it all, from the bottom to the pinnacle of success. He, too, had worked hard, becoming one of the most sought-after research scientists in the field of environmental analytics. They got married, moved into a sprawling 4,000-square-foot penthouse, and Victoria gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Everything was perfect, and then, when their daughter was 8 months old, it all went to hell. Victoria had betrayed him. She let her lover kill their child, then had him locked away like a monster, subjected to inhuman torture in that sunless place. She had broken her vow. But why was it his child who had to die a horrible death? The conversation from next door drifted over. "Tori, darling, you brought that lunatic back today. Shouldn't you go check on it?" Caleb's voice was smug as he pulled Victoria into his arms, clearly having no intention of letting her go. Victoria's beautiful features, bathed in the soft sunlight, seemed to glow. A flicker of disgust crossed her face, and her voice was ice. "Go to get him was more than enough, a nod to our past. Do you really expect me to cook his meals and do his laundry?" Ethan's fist tightened, grinding the gravel deeper into his wounded palm. A dark stain of blood soaked the ground beneath his hand. He forced himself to his feet, scrambling and stumbling into the house. He pulled out his phone, his whole body shaking as he scrolled through a 5-year-old contact list until he found the number for his best friend, Leo. He dialed. "Leo, it's me. I'm out. That person you told me about when you visited. Can you put me in touch with her?" "Seriously, Ethan? You made up your mind?" The tears finally came. Ethan nodded, a single, heavy movement. "I'm sure. I need to get justice. For me, and for my daughter. I'm going to make Victoria Thorne and Caleb Vance pay for what they did to my child." After hanging up, Ethan sat numbly on the sofa for a long time. He finally looked around the house Victoria had arranged for him. The decor was eerily similar to their penthouse when they first got married. Even the small, delicate trinkets they'd collected were here, placed on shelves, dust-free. The curtains, the sofa, the art on the walls. Everything was just as he remembered. On the windowsill sat several pots of succulents. They were the same ones he had planted himself 5 years ago, only now they were thriving, lush and green. It was obvious someone had been taking meticulous care of them. Ethan's gaze softened as he stood by the window, lost in thought. He wasn't so vain as to think that the woman who had destroyed his life would have kindly tended his plants. For a moment, he was just lost in a daze, wondering if Lily were still alive. If none of this had happened, would his life now be as bright and beautiful as these succulents? The sound of the front door opening echoed from the foyer. Someone was coming in. Ethan's back went rigid, but he didn't turn around. He couldn't understand why she wasn't next door. Why had she come back? He heard Victoria slip off her heels and walk toward him. Only then did he slowly raise his head to meet her cool gaze. "Why are you just standing here? Haven't you gone upstairs to look? All your clothes and things are there. I moved everything from the old place." Ethan gave a numb nod. "Thanks," he said, his voice flat. Victoria seemed taken aback, clearly not expecting such a subdued reaction. It took her a moment to recover. She forced a small smile. "How about a drink? You always used to enjoy a glass of something in the evening." She turned and walked to the wet bar, pulling a bottle of scotch from the cabinet. She twisted the cap, poured 2 glasses, and pushed one toward him. "It's a good year. Your favorite." A hint of chocolate. A bitter laugh escaped Ethan's lips. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. He reached for the glass with his unwashed, bloodied hand, the crimson on his skin darker than the amber liquid. He snatched the glass and, in one swift motion, flung its contents into Victoria's face. A sharp crack followed as the glass slipped from his grasp, struck her, and shattered on the floor. "Victoria," he snarled, "isn't there something you want to tell me?" Her expression remained placid. She didn't seem angry. She simply raised her own glass, drained it in one gulp, and then tossed it to the floor, watching calmly as it, too, exploded into 1,000 tiny shards. "Ethan, are you ever going to let this go? Did 5 years in that hospital not cure you of this rabid dog act? It was so long ago. What do you want me to say? That you killed our child because you were jealous of Caleb?" Ethan stared at her, disbelieving. His heart felt like it was being twisted in a vice. He couldn't believe that even now she would spew such blatant, twisted lies. A hollow laugh escaped him. As he staggered backward, his bare foot landed on the shards of the glass he'd just broken. Blood immediately welled up, staining the fragments crimson. Victoria's eyes widened in alarm. Ethan! She rushed toward him, her voice filled with concern. How could you be so careless? Get on the sofa, I'll clean it for you. She pulled him over to the couch, then moved with practiced ease to find a first aid kit. But just as she sat down beside him, her phone rang. She answered. Caleb's frantic voice came through the speaker. Tori, something's wrong with Chloe. She's throwing up, it's awful. You have to come see her, please. Without a moment's hesitation, Victoria hung up and ran for the door. Just before she closed it behind her, she tossed a single sentence over her shoulder. Get some rest. I have to go out. I probably won't be back tonight, so don't wait up. Wait up for her. Ethan reached down and viciously yanked a piece of glass from the sole of his foot. He stared at it, clutched in his hand for a long time. It wasn't until the blood dripped onto the back of his hand that he let out a choked, bitter laugh. I stopped waiting for you a long time ago. After cleaning his wound, Ethan took a shower in the guest bathroom. Then he pushed open the door to the master bedroom. The bed was perfectly made, and next to it, the baby crib was the exact one he had picked out himself. He couldn't hold it back any longer. Tears streamed down his face as he collapsed beside the crib, his body racked with sobs. Tiny clothes were folded neatly on the nightstand. Many of the toys were still in their original packaging. Cans of expired formula and packs of diapers filled the space under the crib. Lily, my baby. Daddy is so sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry I was so weak. So sorry I still haven't gotten justice for you. And Victoria. Her own child had died in that crash, her small body bruised and purple. She hadn't even had the chance to cry out before her life was extinguished. Ethan could still see it all so clearly. Lily's tiny hand resting on his stomach, a bloody mess of flesh and organs. It was a vision of unspeakable cruelty. She was the child's mother. Even if she didn't love him anymore, even if she wanted to spend her life with another man, why did she have to let their child die? His anguished cries filled the bedroom, the empty echoes making his skin crawl. He must have cried himself to sleep. When he opened his eyes again, he was lying on the cold floor. For a disorienting moment, he thought he was back in the institution. He instinctively curled into a ball, his eyes wide with defensive terror. Suddenly, the bedroom door creaked open. A figure entered, holding a syringe, and started walking toward him. A terrified scream tore from his throat as he lunged forward, slamming into the intruder. But it was a child's cry that answered him. When his vision cleared, he saw it was a little girl. It was too late. The girl was knocked to the floor and burst into tears. Victoria and Caleb immediately rushed in, scooping the child up from either side, frantically comforting her. Chloe, sweetie, it's okay. Mommy and Daddy are here. Why did you come in here? Don't cry, don't be scared. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, trembling. Through the sweat-soaked hair plastered to his forehead, he stared at the object on the floor. It was a toy syringe from a child's doctor kit, identical to the one he had bought for his own unborn daughter. Victoria looked up at him, her eyes blazing with fury. She stepped forward before he could react and slapped him hard across the face, twice. Blood sprayed from his mouth, spattering the clean white wall. She grabbed a handful of his hair and yanked his head up, her hot, ragged breath on his face. Are you completely insane, Ethan? Did all those years locked up just make you crazier? Chloe is a child. She's my daughter. What is wrong with you? Are you taking your anger out on a little girl? Ethan stared at her, utterly disgusted by her words. He didn't even bother to explain. What's the matter? When you two conspired to kill my child, did you ever stop to think she was only 8 months old? Did you ever remember she was your daughter too? Why would you put me in a house right next to them? Why not just divorce me and parade your disgusting affair in public? Wouldn't that be easier for you? Victoria's expression shifted, the rage in her eyes burning before being forcibly suppressed. She sighed, her grip loosening as if in surrender. Then, with a tenderness that was almost convincing, she cupped his face in her hands, as if she still loved him. Ethan, I never wanted to divorce you. But our child is gone, and my family's legacy needs an heir. Chloe is my first child, but she won't be my last. Can't you try to understand? Ethan let out a cold laugh, staring at the sanctimonious woman before him. He couldn't comprehend how she could be so shameless. Is that right, Victoria? What's the real reason you haven't divorced me? Is the affair more exciting this way? Or are you just naturally drawn to filth? An illegitimate daughter who craves these dirty little secrets, who loves the stench of it all. Shut up. Victoria's shriek seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. But Ethan wouldn't let her off the hook. He knew all her secrets, her darkest insecurities. The secrets he once cherished and protected with his life were now his most potent weapons against her, just as she had used her testimony to destroy him in court. Why should I shut up? I'll say it again. You, the other woman's daughter. You got your own parents killed because the wealth and status you craved could only be built on their graves. Shut up. Stop it. I won't. Why don't you just die, Victoria? You. Crack. Another slap. Victoria was like a lioness driven mad. You shut your mouth, Ethan Cole. What did you say? Say it again. I dare you. The veins on the back of her hand bulged as it trembled. Her furious eyes were desperately trying to conceal some emotion Ethan couldn't decipher. Finally, she just shoved him to the floor, looking down at him with cold disdain. Since you're so desperate for a divorce, fine. But next month, my subsidiary is having its IPO on NASDAQ. I can't have any negative press. So for now, you're going to stay here and behave. Don't cause any trouble. Otherwise, I got you sent away once, and I can do it again. And if you ever dare to lay a hand on my child again, I'll send you to hell to join that cursed little ghost of yours. With that, she turned, went back to Caleb, took the child from his arms, and walked downstairs without a backward glance. Ethan stared after her, hatred consuming him. Cursed little ghost. She called his child. Her own flesh and blood, born of her own body. A cursed little ghost? Just then, Caleb walked over and crouched beside him, his voice a low whisper in his ear. Ethan, you weren't a match for me 5 years ago, and you're even less of one now. I was the one who asked Victoria not to divorce you. You were right. This is more exciting. He paused, a cruel smile playing on his lips. It's so much more painful for you. Ethan first met Caleb Vance at the funeral for Victoria's parents. Her father had left his first wife for her mother, and they'd run away together. They had Victoria while living in poverty, struggling for years until her grandmother secretly funded them, allowing them to start the company that would become the Thorn Group. But then, Victoria's uncle from her father's first family found her. He told her that if she stole trade secrets from the Thorn Group, they would formally acknowledge her and welcome her into the family. She was desperate for their approval. The stigma of being an illegitimate child had been a crushing weight her whole life. So she stole the documents. But she was set up. Her parents were framed for massive financial crimes and executed. Victoria had sobbed in Ethan's arms, saying the things she hated most in the world were betrayal and being falsely accused. She swore she would never commit those sins herself. And yet, 5 years ago, she had betrayed her own husband and child. How ironic. She was always so good at hurting the people who love her most. And they, Ethan, her parents, had given her nothing but their most sincere and unconditional love. On the day of the funeral, Caleb had said to him, "Mr. Cole, I always get what I want. Did you really think a nobody from the slums like you could ever compete with me?" The Vance Corporation was the Thorn Group's biggest partner. As the sole heir to the Vance fortune, Caleb's first demand was that all future contracts be signed by Victoria Thorn herself. It was an irresistible bait, and a greedy fish was sure to bite. Ethan, feeling like a walking corpse, cleaned himself up. He ate a little something and then decided to go for a walk, only to find a mansion surrounded by a dozen bodyguards. They wouldn't let him take a single step off the property. Of course, the two adjacent mansions. It wasn't a coincidence. It was for his convenience, his convenient imprisonment. She hadn't freed him. She had just built him a bigger, more luxurious cage. She never had any intention of letting him go. Ethan clenched his fists, the veins in his forehead throbbing. He stormed back into the house and slammed the door behind him. In the middle of the night, in a haze of sleep, Ethan sensed someone enter his room. They sat by his bed for a long time, just watching him. In his dreamlike state, he felt a cool hand on his forehead, stroking it gently. The touch was soft, the temperature familiar, filled with a deep, lingering affection. When he woke the next morning, the room was empty. It felt as if the whole thing had been a dream. But Ethan knew. Victoria had been there. There must be paparazzi lurking nearby. She was putting on a show for them, playing the part of the devoted, caring wife. The thought made him sneer. He glanced out the window and, sure enough, saw the glint of a camera lens from a wooded hill in the distance. "You're quite the actress, Victoria," he muttered. "Doesn't it make you sick?" Just then his phone rang. It was Leo. "Ethan, I've made contact. You can meet with her in a week." After that night, Victoria didn't come back. The sounds of laughter and joy from the house next door were like a guillotine hanging over his head, ready to drop at any moment and slice him to ribbons. He languished in the mansion, rarely stepping outside. The constant surveillance in the institution had left him with an unbearable sensitivity to the hum of air conditioning, and the late-season heat was relentless, making sleep impossible. Some days, he would hear faint, fragmented cries from next door. He could just make out a few words. It was that lowlife. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to kill me. Chloe scared, so scared. A sense of dread coiled in Ethan's gut. He had a feeling something worse was coming. Then, on the day of his grandmother-in-law's birthday gala, Victoria sent a message early in the morning. The matriarch wanted to see him. Ethan forced himself to pull it together, taking a shower and putting on a clean suit. But when he stepped out of the mansion, he saw Victoria already standing by her car, holding Chloe. Caleb, dressed in a bespoke suit, stood beside her, smiling and whispering something in her ear. "Ethan," Victoria said, her voice flat and emotionless. "My car only seats 3, and with the driver, there's no room for you. You'll have to find your own way to the estate. We'll see you there." Ethan's hand trembled, and he instinctively clutched the lapel of his suit. This part of Greenwich was exclusive and remote. The wealthy residents all had their own cars, so for privacy, there were no nearby train stations or bus stops. Taxis were non-existent. To get to the family estate, he would have to walk 6 miles in thin-soled dress shoes just to get out of the private community. His feet would be destroyed. Ethan opened his mouth, looked at Victoria's indifferent face and Caleb's triumphant smirk, and finally understood. This was deliberate. This was payback for what had happened a few days ago. The CEO of the Thorn Group couldn't possibly lack a car that could fit 4 people. He managed a weak smile. "Okay, I understand." Ethan stood under the baking sun, watching as Victoria gently buckled Chloe into her car seat, meticulously checking every strap. Only when she was satisfied did she take Caleb's arm. They laughed as they got into the car. The engine roared to life, and they disappeared in a cloud of dust. He stared at the empty road, a memory surfacing. Years ago, when Victoria bought her first car, she had insisted on taking him on a road trip. She was so worried about him getting car sick that she had a custom air purification system installed. Even the passenger seat was a special order. Soft, dry, comfortable. She had told him then, "Ethan, you're the only one I will ever love. This passenger seat will always be yours. As long as I'm around, I'll make sure you live a life of such luxury you'll never have to touch the ground again." Now it seemed she was saying those same words to another man. Ethan walked alone on the descending road. The asphalt radiated the day's heat, and his thin-soled shoes quickly wore through, rubbing his feet raw. Eventually, he had no choice but to take them off and walk barefoot. The sharp gravel cut into his soles, each step a jolt of pain. The blood sizzled and evaporated on the hot blacktop. An hour later, just as he was nearing the closest bus stop, the sky turned dark. A torrential downpour began, soaking him to the bone in seconds. His hair was plastered to his face. He looked like a drowned rat. By the time Ethan finally got on a bus and made it to the Thorn family estate, the party was in full swing. Laughter and celebration filled the air. The old matriarch sat on a velvet chair, with Victoria on one side and Caleb on the other. "Hey, look, isn't that the psycho? What's he doing here? I heard they let him out. Said he was cured. But look at him. He doesn't look cured to me. Better keep our distance in case he snaps." Back when Ms. Thorn was first making a name for herself, this handsome trophy husband was all the rage. Now, he's just a trophy. Ha ha ha. The mocking whispers were loud enough for Ethan to hear clearly. He acted as if he heard nothing, using a napkin to wipe his face dry, and stood quietly at the back of the crowd. Victoria glanced at him, her brow furrowed in undisguised disgust. She turned back to Caleb and lifted Chloe into her arms. "Grandma, our family of 3 wishes you a happy birthday. May you have a long and happy life." A family of 3. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. His child was dead, and the man responsible was standing there with his arm around his wife, holding their daughter, calling themselves a family of 3. How absurd. How cruel. Just then, Chloe spotted Ethan at the back of the room. She pointed a small finger at him, her voice childishly high. "Great-grandma, look. It's that man. He's the one who tried to kill me. He almost threw me down the stairs. I've been having nightmares ever since. Daddy had a psychic look into it, and she said that man is cursing me to die a horrible death." Every eye in the room turned to Ethan. Caleb seized the opportunity, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "It's true, Grandma. I know I don't have any official standing here, and I should just endure it. But my daughter is innocent. What happened all those years ago was an accident. I never meant for it to happen. But Ethan has been after me like a rabid dog ever since, giving me nightmares for years. And now he's fixated on my child. Grandma, I'm truly worried he's going to kill us both one day." Ethan felt like he'd been struck by lightning. He couldn't believe Caleb could twist the truth so completely. He pushed his way through the crowd and stumbled before the matriarch, falling to his knees as tears streamed down his face. "Grandma, the child who died. She was your great-granddaughter, too. I hate Caleb Vance, but I would never, ever harm an innocent child. I'm not him." Caleb rushed forward and punched Ethan in the face. "You vicious liar. You're just trying to twist things. If Victoria and I hadn't gotten there in time that day, you would have thrown my daughter down the stairs." The old woman looked at the chaotic scene and slammed her cane on the floor twice. "Both of you be quiet. Victoria, you tell me. What exactly happened?" Victoria, who had been silent until now, slowly raised her head. She, too, walked her grandmother and knelt. After a moment of silence, she spoke. "Grandma, Ethan is unwell. We felt sorry for him, so we brought him home. But he repaid our kindness by trying to hurt my daughter. I'm very disappointed in him." Ethan's head snapped up. He stared at Victoria in disbelief. His grandmother-in-law's expression soured. She sighed. "Ethan, I used to feel for you. I understand the pain of losing a child. But Chloe is a thorn. Your madness is no excuse for being so reckless. You should know that my letting Victoria bring you home was a great kindness. If you do anything to harm my great-granddaughter again, I can have her send you right back where you came from." Ethan looked at their united front, and the blood in his veins turned to ice. He had no way to defend himself. He knew, with sickening clarity, that this was all Caleb's revenge. Just as he'd whispered in his ear that day, he would make him suffer. Victoria looked at her grandmother respectfully, ignoring Ethan completely, and accepted the blame on his behalf. "Grandma, it's my fault. I didn't watch him closely enough. I'll keep a tighter leash on him from now on. He won't cause any more trouble." Every word she spoke was a knife in Ethan's heart. The matriarch nodded. "Very well. In that case, let this be a lesson, in front of all our guests, so everyone knows that the Thorne family rewards and punishes accordingly." Victoria stood up and walked over to Ethan. She looked down at him, her voice cold and deliberate. "Then send him to the kennel, to the Cane Corso enclosure. Only if the punishment is severe enough will he finally learn his lesson and never think of hurting Chloe again." Ethan struggled, but it was useless. A group of bodyguards quickly swarmed him, tying him up like a pig for slaughter. In front of all the guests, they carried him out of the Thorne estate without a shred of dignity. He was thrown into the enclosure at the family's kennel. The stench of filth and raw meat hit him first. Then, in the darkness, pairs of red eyes began to glow in the corners. He scrambled backward, curling into a ball, screaming Victoria's name over and over. "Victoria! Victoria! You can't do this to me! Victoria!" But no matter how hoarse his throat became, no answer came. The ravenous approach of the dogs and a tidal wave of despair crested at the same time. Ethan flailed his arms, fighting with every last ounce of strength. He couldn't die here. Not like this. He still had to get justice for his daughter. A night passed. Ethan, with more than a dozen chunks of flesh torn from his body, lay half dead against the cage, the pain so intense he could barely breathe. Outside the cage, Victoria stood on the steps, looking down at him. Her eyes were filled with nothing but cold disgust. "Does it hurt?" Her voice was laced with cruelty. "Don't blame me for being harsh, Ethan. I'm sure this is nothing compared to what you went through in that hospital. Consider it a lesson. I can see you want revenge on Caleb, but I can't just stand by and let that happen. From now on, if you behave, I'll make sure you're taken care of for the rest of your life. Otherwise, things will only get worse for you. Do you understand?" Ethan's throat was tight. His voice was a raw whisper when he finally asked the question that had been eating at him. "Victoria, why don't you just divorce me? Marry Caleb Vance, give him the legitimacy he wants." "Because of you, that's why." Victoria kicked the cage violently. The iron bars rattled, startling the dogs, which lunged at him with renewed ferocity. He instinctively recoiled, his back hitting the cold bars of the cage. There was nowhere to run. The estate's butler, who was standing nearby under the matriarch's orders not to let Ethan die, couldn't watch any longer. "Miss Thorne, please calm down. Chloe is fine. Making a bigger scene will only hurt the company's upcoming business." Victoria's brow furrowed. She finally managed to rein in her anger. "Ethan, I'm having someone take you to the hospital now. This ends here." Ethan closed his eyes in defeat, his nails digging into his palms. He still didn't have the answer he needed. As Victoria turned to leave, her cold gaze swept over him one last time. "Let him out and get him to a doctor." A bodyguard immediately came forward to unlock the cage. Ethan's body was limp. As they helped him out, his legs gave way, and he nearly collapsed. Victoria reached out to steady him, but he flinched away from her touch. She frowned, her eyes on his pale face. "Did you hear what I said?" Ethan kept his eyes downcast, silent. In the hospital, the smell of antiseptic was sharp and biting. Ethan lay on the bed, listening to the doctor work on his wounds, the pain making his fingertips tremble. The door to his room opened, and Victoria walked in. She was wearing a stunning red slip dress that revealed the faint, intimate bruises on her collarbone. Ethan's gaze flickered to them for a second before he looked away. Victoria finally spoke, her tone indifferent. Chloe's been unstable ever since that day. She has nightmares, can't sleep. She kept insisting you had to be punished. She's just a child. You had to endure a little discomfort. Just bear with it. You should have learned your lesson after all those years in the hospital. I've set up a research lab for you. As soon as you've recovered, you can take it over. Do whatever you want with it. Consider it compensation for this whole affair. She spoke calmly, as if discussing a business deal. Ethan just laughed. After a moment, he looked up at her, his voice equally calm. That won't be necessary. When I'm healed, I'm leaving. I'll grant you your happy family of 3. My being here only makes things harder for you, doesn't it? Victoria was taken aback. She frowned, her eyes filled with impatience. What kind of tantrum is this? I don't have time for your drama. I'll pretend you never said that. You will stay in that house and behave. I don't care if you run to the ends of the earth. I will find you. With that, she strode out of the room, her back cold and distant. Ethan watched the door close and slowly shut his eyes. A single tear traced a path from the corner of his eye down his temple. He couldn't understand it. She had the man she loved, she had their child, so why wouldn't she just let him go? Just then, the door to his room creaked open again. The sharp click of high heels echoed in the quiet room. The sound was unfamiliar. Ethan's eyes snapped open. He looked toward the door, but before he could speak, a cloth was pressed over his nose and mouth. His consciousness began to fade. In the hazy moments before darkness took him, a low, husky female voice whispered in his ear, "Ethan Cole, if you want revenge, don't struggle." The world spun, and he fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. At the same time, Victoria, who had just gotten home, received a frantic call from her assistant. Her voice was trembling so badly she could barely form a sentence. "Ms. Thorne, it's terrible. Mr. Cole is gone. I just went to his room, and someone left a note. He's been kidnapped." Before Victoria could respond, Caleb's voice came on the line. "Tori's in the shower. You can tell me." The assistant hesitated, then repeated, "Mr. Cole has been kidnapped." Caleb scoffed. He glanced toward the bathroom, a cruel smile on his lips. "That's such an old trick. Besides, even if he was kidnapped, Victoria and I would just celebrate." He hung up the phone. Just then, Victoria emerged from the bathroom, a towel wrapped around her chest. Her damp hair was loose around her shoulders as she leaned languidly against the doorframe. "What was that? Who called?" Caleb smiled and walked over to her, wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling her close for a kiss. "Just work stuff, my love. Chloe's not here tonight. We can finally have some time to ourselves. Let's not talk about anything else, okay?" Victoria frowned. She could tell something was off from Caleb's reaction. For a fleeting moment, an image of Ethan's face flashed in her mind, and a wave of panic washed over her. It was a hollow feeling, as if something precious was about to be lost forever. Caleb sensed her distraction. He cupped her still damp face in his hands and pulled her into a warm embrace, his hands roaming her back. "What's wrong, Tori? Don't you want to be alone with me?" "It's nothing. I guess I'm just imagining things." Victoria shook her head, forcing a smile as she hugged him back. "Oomph. Your mind is wandering when you're with me. I'm going to have to punish you." Caleb's heart finally settled. He began to tickle her playfully, and soon they were tumbling onto the bed. Victoria laughed. "You've had your punishment. Now it's my turn." She wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her lips to his. They wrestled and laughed, a tangle of limbs. Caleb's playful teasing quickly turned passionate, their movements becoming more intimate until they were locked in a deep kiss. The room was filled with the scent of their desire. They didn't leave the bedroom for a full day and night. When the passion finally subsided, Victoria leaned against the headboard, watching the man sleeping beside her. A strange sense of loss crept over her. She wondered how Ethan's injuries were. The thought made her heart clench. She glanced at her phone. No missed calls, no messages. The man didn't seem to care where she went or who she was with. Since Ethan had come back, she seemed to have fallen into a habit of sneaking over to his house at night, after he was asleep, just to look at him. A few times, in his sleep, he had even unconsciously moved closer to her. He clearly still depended on her, so why couldn't he just learn to behave? Why couldn't he just give her a little more time? Victoria frowned, a nameless anger rising within her. Did that man have any sense of what it meant to be a husband? The thought spurred her into action. She got out of bed, intending to go to the hospital to check on him. But just then, Caleb woke up. He reached for her, pulling her back into his arms, his hands exploring her body once more. "Tori, I can't wait any longer. Tomorrow morning, come home with me. We'll tell my parents we're getting married. Divorce that man. Marry me." Victoria's movements stilled. This was what she had been waiting for years. So why, now that the moment was here, did she feel so panicked? In the end, she suppressed her unease and leaned over to kiss Caleb's forehead. Okay, whatever you want. The next morning, Victoria accompanied Caleb to the Vance family estate. On the way, he chattered endlessly. If I hadn't insisted on being with you, my father never would have agreed. But now that we have Chloe, you've passed his test. Whatever my dad says later, don't take it to heart. Just think of it as another test. Do it for me, okay? And when we leave, we can pick up Chloe and go try on wedding dresses. Speaking of which, when are you finally going to ask that man for a divorce? Victoria stared out the window, her brow furrowed in thought. She forced a patient tone. As soon as the IPO is done, I'll ask him for a divorce, okay? Don't rush, Caleb. You know you're the only one for me. Just as she finished speaking, her phone rang. It was her assistant. Caleb glanced at the screen, and his face fell, his hands clenched into tight fists. Before Victoria could answer, he grabbed her hand. Tori, don't answer it. We're almost at my parents' house. Whatever it is, it can wait until after you've spoken with my father. Please. Victoria looked at him, confused. What's wrong with you? What's going on? Caleb's grip tightened, his nails digging into her skin. He looked away, a guilty expression on his face. I just don't want our special moment to be interrupted. Don't answer. What could possibly be more important than meeting my parents to discuss our wedding? Victoria's frown deepened. The sense of panic from the night before returned, stronger this time. She suddenly realized Caleb was hiding something. Her expression hardened, and she pulled the car over to the side of the road. She fixed her gaze on the man in the passenger seat, who was now visibly flustered. Caleb, what is going on? If you don't want me to answer the phone, you'd better give me a damn good reason. Realizing he couldn't stop her, Caleb suddenly broke down. Victoria, are you still in love with Ethan Cole? Is that why you won't divorce him? He's been kidnapped. Now you have nothing to worry about. Victoria's eyes widened. She stared at him in disbelief. What did you say? Who's been kidnapped? Caleb's face went white. He had let it slip. He slumped back in his seat, speechless. A Rolls-Royce sped down the highway toward the city. Victoria's lips were pressed into a thin, hard line, her brow deeply furrowed. The air conditioning was on full blast, but sweat beaded on her forehead and dripped down her temples. Drip, drip. The drops hit the leather seats with a dull thud. She didn't seem to notice. All she could think was faster, faster. 1,000 possibilities raced through her mind. She knew this could all be one of Ethan's pathetic tricks, but she couldn't stop the trembling in her hands. She had to know he was safe. She dialed his number again and again, each time met with the same cold, robotic voice. The number you have dialed is not in service. Ethan Cole, if I find out you're lying to me. If you're lying. This had better be a sick joke. You're a lunatic. Who would kidnap you? She floored the accelerator, running red light after red light. Beside her, Caleb clung to the grab handle, screaming. Victoria, are you insane? Slow down. You're going to make me sick. But she didn't seem to hear him. The car didn't slow. There was only one thought in her mind. She had to see Ethan to confirm he was safe right now. Her mind was a chaotic mess. He had been fine when she left the hospital yesterday. Who would kidnap a madman who had been cut off from society for 5 years? And leave a note. But her assistant was her most trusted employee. He would never help Ethan deceive her. Victoria couldn't make sense of it. All she could do was drive faster, wishing she could teleport to his side. In that moment, she realized with a sickening lurch that she didn't care if he was tricking her. As long as he was alive, as long as he was safe somewhere in the world, she could carry on with her plans. Everything was so close to being finished. Caleb watched the tense line of Victoria's jaw and bit his lip, a bitter taste in his mouth. They had been so close to his parents' house, so close to setting a wedding date. And once again, it was Ethan Cole. What was the point of a madman like him even being alive? He should have died long ago. After a breakneck drive, Victoria arrived at the hospital. Her assistant was standing outside the hospital room, his face pale, staring at the chaotic scene inside. When he saw Victoria, he rushed to meet her. Ms. Thorne, I'm so sorry. I couldn't protect Mr. Cole. Victoria shoved him aside and tried to rush into the room, but she was stopped by the police tape cordoning off the area. Ma'am, I'm sorry. This is a crime scene. Please stay behind the line. We need to ask you a few questions. Victoria stared into the room, and her pupils dilated in horror. The floor was covered in shattered glass. The sheets and pillows were half off the bed. There were splatters of blood everywhere. A bloody handprint had been dragged across the floor for several feet. It looked like a slaughterhouse. A roar filled her ears. She felt like she'd been struck by lightning. The world went silent, her mind a complete blank. How could this happen? He was fine yesterday. How could he have been kidnapped? This hospital is covered in cameras. He was in this state. and no one heard anything. Her head whipped around to the row of bodyguards standing behind her assistant. Her eyes were wild as she lunged at one of them, grabbing his collar and slamming him against the wall. How could you not hear anything? Why didn't you save him? Are you all in on this together? Helping him escape from me? He is my legal husband. We are not divorced, and we will never be divorced. Where is he? The bodyguard was too scared to fight back. He just shook his head frantically. No, Ms. Thorne, we swear, we didn't hear a thing. We can all vouch for each other. We didn't know anything was wrong until the orderly went in with his food and found the note. But Victoria was unhinged, convinced he was lying. She tightened her grip on his collar, lifting him until the fabric choked him, his face turning a shade of purple. The veins on her hands stood out, throbbing, as if she was about to kill him right there. Just then, Caleb rushed over and wrapped his arms around her waist. Victoria, have you lost your mind? Are you going to kill someone over that man? Victoria turned, her crazed eyes meeting Caleb's frantic gaze. He stared back at her, his own eyes red-rimmed. She hesitated, and her grip slowly loosened. The bodyguard slid down the wall and scrambled away. Caleb held her tight. Victoria, isn't it better this way? Now no one will ever get between us. You were just dragging out the divorce because you were worried about bad press before the IPO, right? This is the perfect opportunity. You won't get any negative press. In fact, the shareholders will see you as a victim. They'll sympathize with you. This will be good for you. All of our problems are solved now that he's gone. Why are you so desperate to find him? Victoria stared blankly ahead, a puppet with its strings cut. Caleb shook her, but she didn't respond. His last words echoed in her mind. Why are you so desperate to find him? Yes, why? She didn't know. Logically, her ex-husband was the most useless person in her life. With him gone, her path was clear. She could have everything she ever wanted. So why, when she heard he'd been kidnapped, when she saw this brutal crime scene, did her heart ache with such unbearable pain? Just as she was about to speak, her phone buzzed. A video message. She opened it, and the world tilted on its axis. She stared at the screen, her body trembling, her fists clenched so tight she wanted to reach through the phone and tear the woman in the video to pieces. The image was grainy. A woman in combat fatigues, her face covered in blood, was holding a man by the hair. It was Ethan. His face was a swollen, bruised mess, covered in whip marks. Ms. Thorne, long time no see. You don't need to know who I am. All you need to know is that your husband is in my hands. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the abandoned pavilion in the Catskills. Don't be late. The video ended. Victoria's trembling pupils were filled with anguish. She whirled around to face Caleb, stalking toward him. He was terrified by her expression. He backed away until his back hit the wall. Tori, what's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Victoria's bloodshot eyes were filled with a dark, vicious fury. Her gaze was like a knife, slicing into him. Her voice was hoarse, menacing. You did this, didn't you, Caleb? You had him kidnapped. I already agreed to marry you. Why couldn't you just leave him alone? He's already spent years in that hellhole. What more do you want? In that moment, she was truly insane. There was no trace of affection for him in her eyes, only a murderous hatred. Caleb was completely stunned. He began to tremble, his voice a mixture of hurt and fear. I didn't. How could I? Why don't you believe me, Victoria? How could you do this to me? Victoria shoved his hand away and signaled her bodyguards to restrain him, forcing him to the floor. She stood over him, her voice dripping with venom. If I find out you had anything to do with this, Caleb, you will regret it. With that, she stepped over his prone body and walked away without a second glance. Her entourage of assistants and bodyguards followed, leaving Caleb alone on the floor. He watched her retreating back, biting his lower lip so hard it bled. Ethan Cole, he thought, I will make sure you die a miserable death. Victoria raced back to the mansion. She had to find something, anything among Ethan's belongings that might give her a clue as to who could have taken him. The house was dark and silent. Lights on, she commanded, and the smart home system illuminated the empty rooms. The house was as quiet and still as it had been for the past 5 years. But after taking a few steps inside, she froze. She turned her head slowly, her eyes fixed on the foyer. His slippers were gone. A heavy, suffocating feeling settled in her chest. She began to search the house like a madwoman, room by room. In the bathroom, his toothbrush and towel were missing. In the kitchen, all the dishes he had used had been replaced with a new set. In the bedroom, the bed was made with crisp, clean sheets, as if no one had ever slept in it. Even on the windowsill, the succulents she had tended for him for years had been uprooted, leaving only empty pots in their place. Everything that belonged to Ethan, every trace of his existence, had vanished. because she had only been sneaking over at night. She hadn't noticed these details before. A terrible truth dawned on her. Even if he hadn't been kidnapped, Ethan was already planning to leave. She sank to the floor, her heart feeling as if it were being crushed in an iron fist, leaving her breathless. Ethan sat in a rustic cabin on a mountaintop, holding a mug of hot tea and looking out the window. His body was wrapped in bandages where the dogs had mauled him, the wounds carefully dressed. Despite it all, he looked surprisingly well. Across from him, a woman sipped her coffee. A jagged scar ran across her eyebrow, stark and menacing. "She won't come up here for me," Ethan said, his voice soft, almost ethereal. "This plan won't work. Melina, you know what she's done to me over the years. Using me to threaten her is pointless. You'd be better off kidnapping Caleb Vance, or what?" Melina Reed looked up, a cold smile playing on her lips. The scar seemed to writhe with her expression, but it did nothing to detract from her striking beauty. "Or we could follow your plan. Turn over all the evidence we've gathered and hope she and Caleb confess? Do you really think someone that selfish would ever do that?" Ethan's gaze fell to the files on the table between them. He remained silent. The amount of information she had was even more extensive than Leo had let on. She had clearly been digging up dirt on the Vance and Thorne corporations for years. He picked up one of the files. Inside was a stack of photos. Caleb meeting privately with key figures from his case. The so-called witnesses, the psychiatrist, 2 of the jurors, the judge. He had paid them all off, weaving a web of lies and corruption that had cost one life and destroyed another. Victoria was the key. Caleb, for all his cruelty, was just a fool blinded by obsession. If they could control Victoria, he would fall apart. He just hadn't expected Melina to use him as the bait. "Why me?" Ethan asked, looking up at her. "If she cared about me, she wouldn't have let our child be harmed. If she doesn't care, your plan is bound to fail." Melina stared at her own palm, tracing a long, deep scar there. "You see these?" she asked. "Caleb Vance and his father gave them to me. My mother and I went to see his father, my father. We found out he had married a wealthier woman. The day we went to confront him, Caleb came at us with a knife. He slashed my face. I was millimeters from losing my eye. He told his father that the only way to silence us for good was to kill me. So his father came at me with the knife next. I caught the blade with my hand, but I couldn't dodge the rest." She trailed off, her expression a mask of pain and fury. Her eyes stared into the distance, as if replaying the horrific memory. Ethan sighed. "So, your mother saved you. She died and you lived." Melina nodded, her gaze returning to him. "I ran, and as I was escaping, I ran right into Victoria Thorne." Ethan was stunned. "Victoria is a complicated person," Melina continued. "She could have killed me that day, but she let me go. Just like she could have divorced you. But instead she kept you, a potential threat to her empire, by her side. None of it makes logical sense. So we have to test it. If she comes, the rest of our plan can proceed. If she doesn't, you can walk away from this and find another way to get justice for your daughter." Ethan nodded, saying nothing more. He clenched his fists and stared out the window into the distance. Just then, on the road winding up the mountain below, a Land Rover appeared, speeding toward them. The license plate was familiar. Ethan shot to his feet. "She's here." On the edge of the cliff by the pavilion, Ethan was suspended from an old, gnarled tree, his body dangling over the abyss. His face was a swollen mass of bruises, and the wounds from the kennel, which had been bandaged, were now exposed and raw. A single thick rope was tied around his waist. He looked so thin and fragile that a strong gust of wind might send him plummeting. The Land Rover screeched to a halt by the pavilion, kicking up a cloud of dust. Before the vehicle had even stopped moving, Victoria leaped out and sprinted toward the cliff's edge. "Ethan, don't be afraid. I'm here. I'm here to save you." But she stopped short at the very edge of the precipice, sending a cascade of loose gravel and stones tumbling into the void below. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "Why did you come? Don't you have a husband and child to look after? Isn't this a little inappropriate?" Victoria's face was slick with sweat, her hands trembling as she reached for him. "Ethan, you're my husband. I never wanted to divorce you. I love you, Ethan. I have my reasons for everything. Please, just let me save you, and I'll explain everything, I promise." "Reasons? What reasons?" "The reason you stood by and watched your child die, then perjured yourself to have me locked away for 5 years? Or the reason you had a new child with the man who killed ours?" "Don't bother explaining, Victoria. You're a selfish, backstabbing traitor who betrayed her parents and her husband." His words hit their mark. She collapsed, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "No, Ethan, it's not like that. I love you and I loved our baby. Things are not what they seem. I have never, ever loved Caleb Vance. Ethan's expression hardened. I don't believe you anymore, Victoria. Your love is cheap. It's worthless. The heated exchange had captured her full attention. She didn't notice the figure sneaking up behind her. Melina emerged from the shadows and brought a heavy club down on the back of Victoria's head. She crumpled to the ground, unconscious. When Victoria came to, she was tied up. She struggled against her bonds, her eyes fixed on Melina, who stood before her in hunting gear, a remote control in her hand and a cruel smile on her face. Long time no see, Ms. Thorne. It's amazing what a few years can do. For an illegitimate daughter, you've done quite well for yourself. Victoria stared at the woman, her mind racing. Melina Reed? Melina clapped her hands slowly, a cold smirk on her face. What a good memory. I'm surprised you remember me after all this time. I have to admit, I didn't think you'd actually come. I thought it was a long shot. I never imagined the great and powerful CEO of the Thorne Group would be so sentimental. Victoria glared at her, in no mood for a reunion. I brought the money. Take it and let us go. Her hands, tied behind her back, were clenched into tight fists. Melina laughed. It's not that easy, Victoria. Do you take me for a fool? That money is loaded with tracking devices. The second I leave, you'll be on my tail. I wouldn't get very far, would I? Her expression suddenly darkened. She pointed at Ethan. That man is rigged with explosives. If you try anything clever, all I have to do is press this button, and he'll be blown to smithereens. Victoria's eyes widened in horror. Melina, are you crazy? What do you want? You have me. Let Ethan go. I'll be your hostage. Melina brandished the remote, pacing in front of her. I want Caleb Vance. Here. Now. His life for your husband's. Then you're going to use my phone to hold a live-streamed press conference and confess everything. All the crimes the Vance and Thorne corporations have committed over the years. Victoria was stunned. She looked at Ethan's pale face, her hands trembling uncontrollably. As she was about to argue, a single gunshot echoed from the opposite mountain. The bullet struck the rope holding Ethan, shredding it until only a few fibers remained. He was about to fall. Melina was shocked. She grabbed a pair of binoculars and saw him on the other mountain. Caleb Vance, lying next to a sniper. It's Caleb. He's trying to kill you. But it was too late. Before Ethan could even scream, the rope snapped. He plummeted into the abyss. Victoria's world went white. With a guttural cry, she launched herself off the cliff after him. The man on the other mountain screamed, Torino, but she was already gone. A helicopter flew steadily away from the mountain range. Ethan lay on a medical bed inside, his eyes closed, his brow furrowed in a troubled sleep. Ethan, how are you feeling? Melina tucked the only 2 blankets they had around him. It had taken them hours to find him near hypothermic, in a ravine at the bottom of the cliff. His face was ashen, his breathing shallow. She was beginning to regret her reckless plan. Ethan's eyes fluttered open. He looked at her worried face and managed a weak smile. I'm okay. Melina frowned. He was clearly in agony, but trying to hide it. He curled his body slightly, pressing a hand to his abdomen. The wounds on his body were a patchwork of old and new. The slightest movement must have been excruciating, yet he didn't make a sound, his jaw clenched, sweat beading on his forehead. Melina knew something else was wrong. She moved closer, helping him sit up. Besides the injuries, what else is wrong? Tell me. Ethan finally looked at her, a grimace on his face. In the hospital, they implanted some kind of chip in me. A neurotoxin. It can be triggered remotely. It's been like this for years, but I never knew who. Melina's voice turned to ice. It was Caleb Vance. It had to be. Ethan's gaze shifted. From his pocket, he slowly pulled out a small USB drive and placed it in her palm. A faint smile touched his lips before he passed out. It wasn't a total loss, he murmured. I grabbed this from her pocket before I fell. If she was carrying it, it must be important. In our little cabin, it had 360-degree high-def cameras. Caleb Vance's good life is about to end. I was the bait, but I'm also the endgame. It's time for him to pay. Meanwhile, Victoria had been in a coma for over 2 weeks. Caleb had hired the best doctors in the country, and after 8 surgeries, her condition had finally stabilized. At last, her finger twitched. Caleb's quiet sobbing stopped. His eyes lit up. Doctor, doctor. Her finger moved. The woman in the bed seemed to stir, her brow furrowing. Her eyelids fluttered open. Caleb threw himself onto her bed, overcome with emotion. Tori, you're finally awake. Do you have any idea how worried I was? He wept. The doctor said if you didn't wake up within 48 hours, you might never wake up at all. Victoria's head throbbed. Annoyed, she pushed him away. Why did you have a sniper cut the rope, Caleb? Are you insane? Caleb's crying stopped abruptly. He froze, his hand halfway to wiping a tear, and stared at her in shock. Why shouldn't I have? Couldn't you see? The two of them were working together to set you up. The way he was tied, his hands were free, but he wasn't even struggling. It was all a trap for you. They wanted us dead, Victoria. Her face was pale, her eyes dark and menacing. Even if he wanted me dead, so what? We owe him. It's a debt that has to be paid. Tears streamed down Caleb's face. He grabbed the front of her hospital gown, his voice hysterical. You might want to die, but I don't. Think about the Thorn Group, Victoria. The company you worked so hard to build. You're one step away from the IPO. If you marry me, I can take you even higher. What does Ethan Cole have? He was a burden to you 5 years ago, and he's still a burden now. His words seemed to snap her back to reality. She clenched her jaw, suppressing her emotions. Ethan was dead. She couldn't let his sacrifice be for nothing. She had paid too high a price, lost too much to fail now. After a long silence, Victoria nodded numbly. You're right. He's just a burden. Caleb, seeing her change of heart, pulled her into a tight embrace. You finally understand, Tori. From now on, whatever you do, you have to think of me and Chloe. She's your daughter. Ethan Cole is dead. We can start over. Just pretend he died in that hospital years ago. Do it for Chloe. Victoria said nothing. Beneath the sheets, her hands were clenched into fists. When she looked at Caleb, the affection was gone, replaced by a cold resolve. Fine, we'll get married. But on one condition, I get a seat on the Vance Corporation's executive board. Caleb nodded eagerly. Of course. Anything. I'm my parents' only son. They'd give me the moon if I asked for it. A month later, they were on their way to their engagement party. Try, Caleb said. We can finally be together openly. Now that that lunatic is dead, no one can bother us anymore. Chloe clapped her hands in the back seat. Mommy and Daddy are getting engaged. Mommy and Daddy are getting engaged. Victoria's mind was filled with the image of Ethan falling from the cliff, the look of resolve in his eyes. A shiver ran down her spine. That's right, she said, her voice numb. After today, I'll officially be on the Vance board. Everything will finally be settled. All those years of waiting, of suffering, of losing everyone she loved. It was all leading to this day. Caleb, oblivious to her inner turmoil, continued to chatter. I was the one who was with you when you were just the scorned, illegitimate daughter who helped you become who you are today. That country bumpkin Ethan Cole could never have done that for you. I just met you a little too late. Why should I have had to give you up to him? From the moment I saw you at your parents' funeral, I knew I had to make you my wife. I was willing to do whatever it took. A sharp pain lanced through Victoria's heart. She said nothing, just closed her eyes. The engagement party began. Caleb's father, Marcus Vance, looked at her with condescending disdain. Your parents weren't as pragmatic as you are, but all's well that ends well. You'll join the Vance Corporation, help Caleb run the company. He'll be chairman, you'll be president. Your best days are ahead of you. Victoria bowed her head in silence. Marcus took it as a sign of submission. He had never truly respected her. The guests erupted in applause, praising the powerful union of the two families. Just then, the doors to the grand ballroom were kicked open. A woman in hunting gear strode in. Don't celebrate just yet, Marcus Vance, she shouted. You might want to look at the screen behind you. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the massive screen at the back of the stage. The first image to appear was footage of Ethan's car crash from 5 years ago, clearly taken from dashcam. The accident had happened on a remote road with no surveillance cameras. For 5 years, Melina had searched for the one other car that had passed by that day. Miraculously, the driver was a data hoarder who regularly backed up his dashcam footage. The video clearly showed Caleb Vance's car intentionally ramming Ethan from behind as he walked on the sidewalk, sending him flying. There was no ambiguity. The idea that Ethan had delusionally thrown himself into the car was an obvious lie. He hadn't even known a car was stalking him. Next, a series of photos and videos flashed across the screen. Caleb meeting with and paying off witnesses, doctors, and jurors. A bank transfer record showed a $2 million payment into the judge's account right before the trial. An audio recording of their conversation in the judge's chambers played over the speakers. The guests stared at the stage, where Caleb stood, frozen in shock. He tried to block the screen with his body, a futile gesture. His custom suit was disheveled, his face a mask of disbelief. Lies. These are all lies, he shrieked. This is fabricated. It's a setup to frame me. Ethan Cole is a psycho. A complete and utter psycho. Melina Reed, you're in on it with him. You both want me dead. Well, you can forget it. He's dead now, and you're no match for me. You'll be dead soon enough. The air in the room was thick with tension. Caleb finally turned to Victoria. Tori, You know what really happened? You'll tell them, right? You'll testify for me. This is all fake. Marcus Vance cleared his throat, still not grasping the severity of the situation. He glanced at Melina in the crowd, his other daughter. He would have to get rid of her. Victoria, in my eyes, you're already my daughter-in-law. We can deal with this. The most important thing is to present a united front. Say something. Victoria, who had been silent this whole time, slowly lifted her head. A vicious glint appeared in her eyes. As everyone watched, she spoke. I have evidence of my own, proof that Marcus and Caleb Vance coerced me into framing my husband, Ethan Cole. My husband was never mentally ill. He was framed. He is the true victim. The room erupted in gasps. No one understood what was happening. She walked toward Caleb, her slender figure casting a long shadow under the crystal chandeliers. For years, I obeyed you, adored you, worshipped you. It was all for this moment. I admit I wronged my husband. I admit I was ruthless in pursuit of my goals. But I never, ever loved you. Caleb's face went chalk white. Now that he's dead, she continued, her voice low and simmering with rage, it's my duty to get justice for him and for my child. She looked up at Melina. I know you and Ethan planned this kidnapping together, but it was because of you that he died. You owe him. What are you waiting for? You found the USB drive I dropped that day, didn't you? Play it. Melina smiled. She turned and gestured toward the open ballroom doors. Why don't we let the victim reveal the truth himself? And then Ethan Cole walked in. His eyes were fixed on Caleb as he strode to a nearby laptop, inserted a USB drive, and hit play. The screen lit up with new footage. Marcus Vance torturing Victoria's parents, forcing them to sign over the rights to a multi-billion-dollar project. Then the image shifted to a tiny baby in an incubator. Caleb's voice filled the room, using the child's life to threaten Victoria, forcing her to do everything she did to Ethan. The non-human torture in the institution. It was all Caleb paying off the doctors. Tears streamed down Ethan's face. The first time he'd seen that video, he had finally understood everything. His child hadn't died in the crash. Chloe was his daughter. He stared at Caleb, his voice shaking with rage. Caleb Vance, it's time to pay for your sins. From the moment Ethan appeared, Victoria hadn't taken her eyes off him. She jumped down from the stage, reaching for him, but froze when she saw the look in his eyes. Ethan, it's really you. You're alive. Ethan, you saw everything. I was forced to do it. I had no choice. You're alive. That's wonderful. We still have a chance, right? Ethan cut her off, his voice devoid of all emotion. Victoria, what happened with Caleb and what happened between us are two different things. Now is not the time to talk about this. Marcus Vance could no longer stand it. He had his bodyguards escort the guests out, then grabbed his son. So, you all think you're so clever, do you? Turning on me? We'll see about this, he snarled, and dragged Caleb from the room. Victoria knew she had to deal with the Vances before she could even begin to ask for Ethan's forgiveness. She went straight to her office and called an emergency meeting. Immediately sell all of my 20% stake in the Vance Corporation, well below market value. Then, leak to the press that Marcus Vance is under criminal investigation. I want to see their stock plummet by closing time tomorrow, and I want it to stay there. Terminate all of our partnerships with them. Her voice was ice. And issue a statement. Victoria Thorne of the Thorne Group has no connection to Caleb Vance. I have my own husband. Also, she said, throwing a file onto the table, use every media contact we have to make this go viral. By tomorrow morning, I want this to be the top story on every news platform. The head of her legal team picked up the file. His eyes widened. With this evidence, Marcus and Caleb Vance were finished. They would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Is there a problem? Victoria asked, a cold smile on her face. The lawyer quickly looked down. No, ma'am. I'll get right on it. The Vance household was in chaos. Caleb was pacing like a caged animal when his phone rang. Mr. Vance, you have to see the news. It's a disaster. As he hung up, a news alert popped up on his tablet. The headline made him freeze. Breaking. Vance Air indicted for murder, assault, and a litany of other crimes. The article included photos of him paying off witnesses, hitmen, and the judge, along with a string of bank transfer records. The text was a detailed, first-person account of the entire conspiracy, signed by Ethan Cole. Caleb's hands were shaking as he scrolled down. More headlines popped up, filling his screen. Most were official statements from the Thorne Group, reposted by every major news outlet. This is impossible. How is this possible? He collapsed onto the floor, tears streaming down his face. Tori loves me. She couldn't have no feelings for me. It's impossible. Before he could process it all, a crowd of reporters had gathered outside, their cameras flashing, shouting for him and his father to come out and make a statement. Caleb's vision went black, and he fainted. With a court-ordered DNA test, Ethan officially became Chloe's guardian, changing her name to Chloe Cole. Victoria cooperated fully. But the little girl, deeply influenced by Caleb, violently rejected Ethan, throwing anything she could get her hands on at him. "You're not my daddy. My daddy is Caleb. You're a bad man. Daddy said you're a bad man." Ethan's heart broke. The son of the man who had tormented him had raised his own daughter to be a weapon against him. It was a new, more cruel form of torture. Victoria approached him, her hand trembling as she reached out, wanting to offer an explanation. But she stopped short when he looked up, his eyes blazing with a raw, crimson fury. They held hatred, blame, and a deep, visceral resentment. The love was gone, replaced by an icy void that filled her with despair. "Ethan, you know everything now. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was forced. Everything I did, pretending to be with him, it was all for Chloe. But in my heart, I never stopped loving you." Ethan scoffed. "Loving me? How exactly did you love me?" Victoria froze, her mouth open, but no words came out. He shook his head, a bitter smile on his face. He took out his phone and played a video, evidence from a psychiatric hospital, too brutal to ever be released to the public. It showed him, stripped naked and strapped to a metal bed in a special ward. He was being tortured with electric shocks, needles, and whips. His skin was a bloody, mangled mess of overlapping wounds. After each session, they would pour a solution of cayenne pepper and rubbing alcohol over his entire body. Victoria couldn't watch anymore. She clutched her head, a desperate, agonized cry tearing from her throat. Pain and regret ripped through her like a wild beast, tearing her heart to shreds. What had she done? For revenge, for her parents' company, for the so-called protection of her daughter, she had taken a man who had stood by her through everything and turned him into a monster in the eyes of the world. She had subjected him to humiliation and torture, separated him from his child for 5 years, and forced him to believe his daughter was dead, only to find her alive but hating him. It was too cruel, and she was the executioner who had destroyed her own family. Tears streamed down Ethan's face. He looked down at his daughter, who was staring at him with a mixture of fear and hostility. The pain was unbearable. "Victoria, how could I ever forgive you? There were other ways, better ways, to handle this. But you kept it all a secret. You made me a pariah. How am I supposed to forgive that? When you had me thrown to those dogs, when you made me walk for miles barefoot, did you ever stop to think how disgusting that kind of love is? You knew, didn't you? The crueler you were to me, the more convincing your act would be for Caleb. The faster you could get what you wanted. Am I right? Stop lying to yourself, Victoria. You're a selfish, self-serving woman. You always have been." Time seemed to stop. Victoria stumbled backward and collapsed onto the floor. She raised her hand and slapped herself, hard, her voice a raw, broken scream. "I was wrong, Ethan. I was so wrong. I regret it all. I'll make the Van Cess pay. Please, just give me one more chance." Ethan shook his head gently. "I don't need you anymore, Victoria. I haven't needed you since the day you left me in that hospital. I'll get my own justice. I'll win back Chloe's heart. I'm filing for divorce. You know I have proof of your infidelity. The court will grant it immediately. We'll be done." He scooped Chloe into his arms, ignoring the tiny fists beating against his chest, and walked away. Victoria's desperate screams followed him, but he felt nothing. At 2:30 in the morning, the air in the Greenwich mansion was thick with the smell of alcohol. Victoria sat on the floor by the window, surrounded by more than a dozen empty liquor bottles. She was a wreck, her eyes vacant and dull. Outside, the lights of the city sparkled, but her world was colorless. Ethan's words echoed in her mind, squeezing her heart until she could barely breathe. She tipped back the last bottle, letting the burn slide down her throat. "Ethan, my Ethan," she whispered, her voice raw. "What can I do to make it right? To get you back?" She staggered to her feet and stumbled into the kitchen. She grabbed a fruit knife and, with a blank expression, began to slice open her arms, one cut after another. Blood dripped onto the floor, but she didn't seem to feel it. A faint smile touched her lips. "Ethan, I'm sorry. This must have hurt so much more for you, didn't it? You asked me how I could say I loved you. Well, what if I give back all the pain you suffered? Will that earn me even a shred of your pity?" Her voice grew weaker, her eyelids heavier. With the last of her strength, she crawled to the sofa, where a single, tattered photograph of Ethan remained. It was the only trace of him left in the empty house. She clutched the photo in her hand, the sharp edges digging into her palm. She felt nothing. Her consciousness faded into darkness. When she woke, it was to the smell of antiseptic. Ethan was standing by her hospital bed. Melina was with him. Victoria's eyes widened, hoping it wasn't a dream. She reached for him, but he pulled his hand away. Melina laughed, her face a mask of contempt. A little late for regrets, isn't it, Victoria? Ethan is done with you. You could torture yourself to death, and it wouldn't even begin to make up for what you did to him. Victoria glared at Melina, then turned back to Ethan, her voice a hoarse rasp. Ethan, it's okay if you don't forgive me. It just means I haven't done enough. I'll pay you back for everything. Ethan cut her off, his face impassive. The court has already granted my divorce petition. It's official. He took a folded document from his pocket and placed it on the bedside table. It was her copy of the divorce certificate. It's over, Victoria. No, it's not over. It can't be. I just haven't done enough yet. Don't go, Ethan. I was wrong. I'll prove it to you. Her screams echoed through the ward, but Ethan walked away without a second's hesitation. In her struggle, she dislodged the foreigner hand, and blood bloomed across the white sheets. It took several security guards to restrain her. She tore out the four and ran barefoot from the hospital. She immediately had her legal team accelerate the proceedings against the Van Cess, pouring millions into a media campaign to keep the pressure on. When Marcus and Kayla Vance were transferred from house arrest to prison, a crowd was waiting. They were pelted with rotten eggs, garbage, and filth, emerging from the gauntlet covered in blood and shame. Ethan stood quietly in the crowd. Caleb's eyes found his. "Don't look so smug, Ethan Cole," he screamed, his face contorted with rage. "Your daughter hates you. You'll never have a happy family. I'll be cursing you from hell." Ethan just smiled and pulled Chloe out from behind him. The little girl stared at the wild, animalistic man who had claimed to be her father. "So it's true," she said, her voice small. "You're not my real daddy. You never loved me, did you? My real daddy tells me to love the world and love myself, not to hate people or hurt them. He holds me when I have nightmares. He doesn't use me as a tool to get mommy to come home. Mr. Vance, I know who loves me." Her small face was filled with a sad wisdom beyond her years. In the midst of the chaos, she had grown up. Ethan bent down and lifted her into his arms, kissing her cheek. "I would do anything for my daughter," he said, his voice calm. "I'll wait as long as it takes. But you, Caleb, you're never getting out." Caleb's last thread of sanity snapped. He went limp, collapsing into a sobbing heap. The Van Cess were tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. Melina decided to return to Europe to continue her work. Ethan accepted a position at an environmental research institute there, preparing to emigrate with her. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, a rare moment of peace. "I want to show you something," Melina said, sliding a portfolio across the table. It was an investment proposal for an overseas environmental center. "Ethan," she began, "I don't want this to be goodbye. For the past 5 years, I've visited you at that hospital countless times. We never met, but I know what you went through to survive. Leo always told me what a resilient man you were. And he was right. Over the years, you became a part of my life, a shadow I couldn't shake. The moment you agreed to meet me, my first feeling was a kind of shy nervousness." Ethan knew what was coming. He started to interrupt, but she held up a hand. "Don't. I know you might not be ready for a relationship. I just want you to know that my feelings for you are more than just camaraderie. I like you, Ethan. A lot." Ethan smiled, a clean, pure smile he hadn't shown in years. "Melina, I was just about to say, I chose to emigrate to your country. Doesn't that tell you everything?" Melina stared at him, stunned. He was smiling, a playful glint in his eye, but his gaze was filled with a deep, gentle affection. Her heart skipped a beat. She pulled out the second gift she had brought, one she thought she would never have the chance to give him. It was a key to her house. Their eyes met, and nothing more needed to be said. The next morning, Ethan settled Chloe for the day and went out to finalize their paperwork. As he stepped outside, a hand clamped over his mouth from behind. The world went dark. When he woke, he was in a car. The door was open, and Victoria was kneeling on the pavement outside. She had lost a shocking amount of weight. Her eyes were sunken, with dark circles underneath. "Ethan, I'm sorry," she said, her voice weak. "This was the only way I could see you. You wouldn't have come with me, would you?" He rubbed his temples. "Victoria, it's over. I will never forgive you. I'm moving overseas with Chloe. You may have been coerced by the Van Cess, but you made your own choices. You know what you did. The police will be coming for you soon." Victoria bowed her head in pain. "I know. I'll accept my punishment. But Ethan, if I ever get out, I will find you. You are the only man I have ever loved. I will never give up on you." She stood up, closed the car door, and told the driver to drive slowly. Then she took off her shoes and began to walk along the shoulder of the road. Ethan knew immediately what she was doing. He rolled down the window. "Victoria, what's the point? This is useless. Nothing you do will make me forgive you. I'm leaving with Melina. We're together." Victoria whirled around, the blood draining from her face. His voice held a tenderness she had never heard him use for anyone but her. We're getting married. So give it up, Victoria. Whatever you do, it won't change anything. His voice was soft, but the words were like knives. You know me. I'm stubborn. When I love someone, I don't give up. But I'm done hitting my head against that wall. And when I give up, I don't go back. She threw herself at the car window, grabbing his hand. I haven't finished making it up to you. How can you be so sure? The driver slammed on the brakes. Ethan looked at her, startled, but quickly regained his composure. Because I love someone else. Your suffering means nothing to me now. That's not true, she cried, her voice hoarse, her eyes red. Stop lying to yourself, Victoria. He held up his hand. My immigration papers are all in order. I'm leaving with Chloe soon. With every word, her face grew paler. Her voice trembled. Don't do this, Ethan. Don't do this to me. He had never seen her like this. So broken, so desperate. I know I was a fool, she whispered, a smile that was more like a grimace on her face. I chose the most painful way to do things. Maybe this is my karma. But please, just let me finish what I started. Then you could decide. Before he could answer, she had composed herself. I'm going to walk the 6 miles. This road is worse than the one by the mansion. More gravel. She let go of his hand. This is just the beginning. She turned and began to walk, her bare feet pressing into the sharp stones. Blood soon stained the ground, each step leaving a crimson footprint. She stumbled, but she kept going. When she finally finished, she was trembling so violently she could barely stand. Her feet were a bloody, mangled mess. But she walked back to the car and, with a smile, knelt before him. 6 miles, Ethan. She looked up at him, her voice a rasp. My feet are destroyed. Does that make you feel any better? Ethan's whole body was shaking. Victoria, are you insane? She just laughed. She forced herself to stand, her cold hand grasping his. Her expression was a terrifying mix of obsession and madness. Yes, I am insane. I should have gone insane 5 years ago. I never should have let you go. We should have died together. She didn't go to a hospital. She got in the car and had the driver take them to the kennel. She stepped out and walked toward the enclosure. Just before opening the gate, she looked back at him. Ethan, this time, I'm giving my life back to you. She walked into the enclosure without a backward glance. The dogs, smelling the fresh blood on her feet, were even more frenzied than they had been for him. They lunged, and she didn't even try to defend herself. The sound of tearing flesh echoed in the silence. The stench of blood filled the air. More dogs joined the attack, ripping chunks of flesh from her body. She clenched her jaw, not making a sound. Finally, the dogs grew tired and slunk away. The ordeal was over. Victoria lay on the ground, barely a patch of unmarred skin left on her body. The cage was a slaughterhouse. Ethan, she whispered, a pained smile on her face. My Ethan, so this is how much it hurt. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Tears streamed down her face, stinging her open wounds. She hissed in pain, but her heart was filled with a strange sense of elation. She had survived. She could continue to atone. She dragged herself to her feet and staggered back to the car, reaching out to touch his face. He flinched away. She looked at her bloody, filthy hands. I was wrong, Ethan. Do you feel any better now? It's okay if you don't forgive me. I can keep going until I'm dead or until the day you forgive me. After a crude bandaging, she went straight to the psychiatric hospital. The moment they arrived, Ethan began to tremble uncontrollably. This place was the source of all his nightmares. Victoria stood with her back to him in the familiar room. Ethan, she said, her voice shaking slightly. This is where it all began? Let's end here. She turned, her eyes dark. The torture I've chosen is a level higher than what you endured. But don't worry. The doctor who hurt you has been arrested. He's not getting out. It's useless, Victoria, Ethan said, his voice cold. But she had already lain down on the metal bed, strapping herself in, connecting the electrodes. Ethan, she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. I want to ask you one last time. Can you forgive me? This setting is lethal. Once I start it, there's no turning back. Please, just forgive me this once. Ethan's pupils contracted. Are you crazy, Victoria? You're threatening me with your own life. No, Victoria said with a faint smile. I have nothing left, Ethan. I spent all those years playing a part, pretending, all for the day when I could be with you and Chloe, out in the open. And now I've succeeded. The man who killed my parents has been punished. But I've lost you. I can't accept it, Ethan. I love you. I'll die without you. He stared at her, his chest heaving. I've already told you, Victoria. You can't undo the harm you've done. Nothing you do will make me forget that pain. I can't forgive you. Is that so? Her voice was a whisper. Her eyes held a look of both gentle affection and wild obsession. Fine. Then hate me forever. At least you'll always remember me. With that, she slammed her hand down on the button beside her. A massive jolt of electricity convulsed her body, the veins in her neck and arms bulging. More currents surged from all directions. She didn't even blink. Then came the needles. The surface of the bed erupted with thousands of sharp points, piercing her already mangled flesh. Blood sprayed from her body. She smiled faintly. "Ethan, I love you." Ethan stood frozen, his nails digging into his palms. He watched her blood drip onto the floor, watched her eyes lose focus. He watched as the police, who had finally arrived, cut the power, handcuffed her to the stretcher, and loaded her into an ambulance. He never said a word. His back was soaked with cold sweat. His legs gave out, and he collapsed. From somewhere far away, he heard a familiar, panicked voice. Melina's voice, muffled as if through glass, slowly calmed the frantic beating of his heart. It was finally over. 2 years later, Victoria was released from prison. She had nothing. As she walked out of the prison gates, she saw, in a shimmering heat haze, the boy she had known years ago, his smile as bright as the sun. The boy waved to her. "Tori, welcome home." A bitter laugh escaped her, and she fell to her knees, sobbing under the hot sun. Her newly activated phone was playing a news report. The marriage of renowned American environmental expert Ethan Cole to Melina Reed, CEO of the Cole Corporation. A photo showed the three of them, Ethan, Melina, and Chloe, smiling for the cameras. "I'm so grateful to my husband," Melina was saying in the interview. "He was with me from my lowest point to the pinnacle of my career. Everything I have today, I owe to him. I love my husband, and I love my daughter, Chloe Cole. Our family will also be making regular donations to orphanages. We want those children to never give up hope, to be as resilient and brilliant as my husband." Victoria wept uncontrollably. She had dreamed so many times of the day she could stand before the world and declare her love for Ethan Cole, that he was the only man she had ever loved. Now, she would never have the chance. If she had known that her path of revenge would cost her him, she would have rather let the Van Cess destroy her long ago. But there were no second chances. She would never get him back. Just then, a car came speeding down the road, its driver drunk. He didn't see the woman kneeling on the pavement. The impact sent her flying. She was killed instantly. The news reached the U.S. Ethan was tucking Chloe into bed. They were whispering secrets when the little girl's words trailed off into a soft murmur, and she fell asleep. He smiled gently and kissed her forehead. Melina came into the room. "I just got a call. Victoria was killed in a car accident. Karma," he thought, could be a strange and terrible thing. Ethan shook his head with a sad smile. Perhaps it was all destined to happen. He stood up and took Melina's hand, leading her out of their daughter's room. They stood together on the moonlit terrace. "Melina," he said, "thank you for loving me. Thank you for finally giving me a happy home." Melina smiled and leaned her head against her husband's chest. "And thank you, my Ethan," she whispered. "Whatever I lost in my life, it was all worth it to have this." Ethan didn't speak. His heart was full.